So you finally just saved up enough money to buy that big brake kit.
Or you're looking to get wheels to put around your big brake kit.
So today we're going to talk about the top 5 things you need to think about when selecting wheels for those big brakes.
Point number 1 is height.
We seem to get a lot of questions when people are trying to check the height of their big brake kit. They say, what's the inner barrel diameter? And there's a few reasons that just doesn't work. One of those reasons is because if you look at the inner barrel diameter, it changes. The height of the actual barrel and the diameter inside the wheel, it will change as the barrel goes from front to the back of the wheel. So when it comes to height, there's a couple things we want to do. The easiest one would just be to do a test fit of the wheel. But if it gets really close, there's some other things you need to think about, like how much that caliper protrudes height-wise toward the drop center of the wheel, where you often find wheel weights. If you don't have enough room there, you can possibly have an issue where the wheel weight could hit the caliper.
So point number 2 is caliper protrusion. Scott, what is caliper protrusion?
So caliper protrusion is the amount that the caliper protrudes past the wheel mounting surface. So if you would draw a straight line straight up from the wheel mounting surface of the rotor, how much of that caliper hangs over? And you've heard this referred to as the X factor.
Why is it called the X factor?
Because that's what they refer to it as.
Like that's the actual technical term, X factor.
Actually, yeah, it's exactly it's whatever.
That's pretty interesting.
When you measure a drawing, right? You measure a drawing, there's the number that they talk about X factor is actually the amount that it hangs over, like if you draw it straight up over the wheel mounting surface. And then they have the Y, which is, I think usually the total brake height, and then Z, which is usually up to the bottom of the brake.
So X factor as meaning
meaning
on a
how
graph,
much it sticks past. Yeah, this is very technical. I hope you're following along at home.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Anyways, so the bigger the protrusion, the more likely you'll have issues with clearance.
That's true. I mean, it makes sense. If the brake is going to be larger, it gets more toward the spoke of the wheel. And now a spoke design or a spoke shape really plays into whether that protrusion could potentially crash.
So what if you purchase wheels and brakes hit the back of the spokes?
Buy new wheels. In all seriousness, if you have a wheel that contacts the back of the spoke, you need to have at least about 3.5 millimeters of clearance between the brake and the actual wheel itself. So that's sometimes where people will use the use of spacers. Again, we don't condone the use of spacers, but a mild spacer, as long as you have enough thread engagement, that's the place where you're going to want to utilize that to save using the wheel on your brake. And if you're looking for some more information, we actually did something like this on our podcast. You can head over to our YouTube channel and look for it there.
Point number 3 is offset and width. How does offset affect caliper clearance?
So obviously the lower the offset of a wheel, the more potential clearance you have toward the protrusion of a caliper. Unfortunately, that can depend on the spoke shape of the actual wheel design itself.
So how does width affect caliper clearance?
So if it's at the same given offset, the more width you have on a wheel, potentially the more clearance a brake could have protrusion-wise.
So even though Koenig does not endorse the use of spacers, they are a very beneficial tool in helping get more caliper clearance out of your car.
This is right around that topic where we start talking about, could a wheel spacer potentially help you gain caliper protrusion clearance? And the answer is yes. A spacer is essentially like getting a lower offset wheel. So if you have a 35 millimeter offset wheel and you put a 10 millimeter spacer on it, it's a 25 millimeter offset wheel, which now means you have 10 more millimeters of clearance. So a spacer could buy you some extra clearance here. Again, it's all about thread engagement, and it's not something we endorse.
When it comes to offset and width, don't overdo it.
Yeah, that's one point that you don't want to get too aggressive, because as much as you may pick up some clearance for that brake, the one thing that you may do is stick the wheel outside of the car or cause some rubbing issues that can be pretty catastrophic.
Point number 4 is spoke profile and concavity. So what is spoke profile?
Spoke profile is basically the shape of a spoke on a given wheel. Every wheel design is going to have a different shape, and it's really important that you kind of consider this, because a lot of times people are trying to use offset and width as a way of determining whether a wheel fits for a car, but the shape of that spoke could easily burn you when it comes down to that caliper. A more concave wheel may look cool, but the one thing that it has as a negative is that it limits caliper clearance. As the spoke comes back toward the center of the wheel, that often cuts off the bottom of the caliper, and when that happens, that's usually where you can experience a caliper crashing. So concavity is really, really cool looking, but sometimes it can be the thing that really kills that brake fitment.
Point number 5 is brake caliper templates. So what are brake caliper templates and how are they used?
So a brake caliper template is usually a 2D drawing to scale of a brake caliper and a rotor. It basically shows us exactly what the brake is going to look like, and there's 2 ways you can use it. The first way, you can go ahead and print it to scale, cut it out, and actually put it into the back of a wheel to see if that caliper will impact the back of the spoke. The other way you can do it is you could send us that brake caliper template in a PDF form. We'll go ahead and queue it up in AutoCAD, and we'll be able to tell you exactly if it's going to fit that wheel. Usually you can find these brake caliper templates on the websites of the brake manufacturer that you're purchasing from.
So that's it for the top 5 things you need to take into consideration when getting wheels for that big brake kit. Make sure you like and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below.
Please check out our podcast, and that's it. We'll catch you next time. Known as the X factor is the point where
You're going like this and like in front of me. You're just like
well, it's hard to stay in like one spot, but
So that's it for the top 5 things you need to take into consideration when selecting wheels for your big brake. Make sure you like and subscribe, and then that's when you go.
Oh. All right.